Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Hey everybody, it's Jared. Welcome to another episode of All Things Crime. I am your host, Jared, and I have Vic Ferrari with me. Vic is retired NYPD. I got to read this. And Vic, welcome to the show. And all of you that are listening or watching, please hit the subscribe button and the bell so you never miss an episode. But Vic, to bring you on, doing a little research on you, as you would expect, of course, I came across this description. And I think this might give a little insight to the watchers and listeners about who you are. And hopefully we can delve into this. So, wanted to read this. It says, about the author, Vic Ferrari, author of Dickheads and Debauchery and Other Ingenious Ways to Die, is a retired 20-year veteran of the New York City Police Department, a Bronx resident for over 40 years. He now splits his time between sunny Florida and his timeshare in North Korea. That must be interesting. He lives with this Irish wolfhound puppy who follows him everywhere, including into the bathroom. It sounds like my wife and the kids. He enjoys writing, cooking, and managing a co-ed softball team filled with unhappy, complaining miscreants. This past summer, he fulfilled his childhood dream of throwing out the first pitch of a minor league baseball game under an assumed name. All right. So with that introduction, Vic, I guess you need to kind of maybe explain some of that.
Sure. My name isn't Vic Ferrari, but I write under a pen name. So a friend of mine had asked, he was running some event at a minor league baseball stadium, and he said, you want to throw out the first pitch? I said, sure. If I could throw out the pitch as author Vic Ferrari. He goes, yeah, I don't give a shit. So they called out my name. I marched out to the mound, and I threw out the first pitch of a game, and everybody clapped, and nobody knew who the hell I was. I don't live in North Korea. I live in sunny Florida, as I was telling you off camera. I've written 6 books. In the back of, I always struggle with what to write about the author. So I kind of make it into like a joke. I always throw something in there, like I have a timeshare in North Korea. Another one, blurb I wrote in the back of the book is I insist on you taking off your shoes when entering my home, and I split my time between sunny Florida and Papua New Guinea. So I just put it in there to see if the readers are paying attention.
Well, hopefully some of them do. Do you get much feedback when you throw that out there?
Believe it or not, there's a lot of people that believe that shit. And I always think it's funny because, up until a couple of years ago, we were like mortal enemies with North Korea. Now we're not really good friends with them again. But, why in a million years would they, be leasing out timeshares? So, yeah, there's a lot of naive people out there, but I'm going to keep putting it out there until somebody catches on what I'm doing.
Fair enough. So you spent 40 years in the Bronx, and for those of us that can recognize a New York accent, it's fairly strong with you. It's all of my other guests from New York have kind of had the same thing. I don't know if you know Christian Flood.
NYPD?
Yeah. I just retired a couple of years ago.
You know what it is? New York City Police Department at any given time has between 30 and 40,000 members. So, I mean, although it's happened where someone has just thrown out some generic name and I go, oh, yeah, I knew that guy or I knew that girl, but no, I don't know him.
Okay. Yeah, some of the other guests I've had from NYPD are Zeke Arkham as well as Scott Wagner. So, no?
No, unfortunately, no.
Okay. Well, anyway, maybe someday we'll have an All Things Crime reunion of NYPD officers that have been on the show, and we'll get everybody together.
I can
down there with you in Florida somewhere.
Well, I can absolutely guarantee you if you had like a panel with me and a couple of those guys retired from the NYPD, it would look like the Brady Bunch with the little heads. And I guarantee you within 5 minutes, we would know people in common and know, or if we didn't know people in common, we would know like famous pains in the asses that worked for the department that at some point in our careers we all had to deal with. So, yeah, I guarantee you there'd be some form of familiarity within 5 minutes.
Yeah, fair enough. Any kind of a small community. I mean, 30, 40,000 plus who knows how many have rotated through there in the last 20 years, but it's still a tight-knit community and for very good reason. I mean, I have a military background, and so, anybody that's in the military, especially the Army, which is where I served, you just automatically have a camaraderie. You know people, and it's, like you said, you may not have run into them specifically, but you know people that know people. So love it, man. And there's just something special about the entire law enforcement community that you guys have a camaraderie that is really special. And in many ways, I'm kind of jealous of it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, within the department, there is a camaraderie, and then there's also a camaraderie with different law enforcement agencies where you could pick up the phone and call someone that works in another agency and like, hey, I need help with this case, or could you look into this for me, or I'd really appreciate it if you could do this for me. It'd save me a day of having to drive up there. And for the most part, everybody plays nice with each other. Every now and then you get a pain in the ass that won't, or an agency for whatever reason is, different agencies, they're like fat kids holding the candy bars and they don't want to give you one. They're sitting on something. They really don't want to give away that for whatever reason. And you run into that from time to time with different agencies and different people in law enforcement. But for the most part, I mean, everybody plays nice and gets along.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're working on specific cases. If there's, I've just known how many cases that have started in one place and ended in a completely different jurisdiction. And so if you don't play nice together, then a lot of times the crime doesn't get solved. And that's really what matters.
Yeah, and I worked in auto theft. So like my last 10 years, I was a detective in the NYPD's auto crime division. So anything with chop shops, exporting stolen vehicles out of the country, changing VIN numbers on stolen vehicles for resale, a lot of mob cases. But a vehicle can go anywhere, right? So a lot of times we did multi-country agencies with stolen. I had a stolen vehicle that was imported from this African country called Cote d'Ivoire. It was brought in by a diplomat. We had a diplomat driving around in Lower Manhattan with a stolen Mercedes, and I had to work through channels to find out, was this vehicle really stolen, or was it a failure to cancel? How the frick did this car get into the country? Then once I determined, it is stolen, how am I going to get it back? My first instinct was to go to Mercedes, get a key cut, and steal the car back. And I went to the State Department. They're like, no, please. You're going to start an international incident with this shit. So what they wound up doing is they brought in, it was the diplomat's husband was the dirtbag. And, she showed up with the car and could not have been more apologetic. This is a big misunderstanding. Please take the fucking car. And we did. And, was your husband around? Because we'd really like to talk to him. And obviously I couldn't have, because he enjoyed the same protections as a diplomat because he was married to her. Oh, no, unfortunately, he's out of the country. Of course he is. And, the car goes back to France. A couple of weeks later, I get a phone call from the husband. And, now he kind of came out of whatever mouse hole he was hiding in. And he's pounding his chest, making a big deal with his wife standing there going on about, you had no right to take my car, blah, 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 blah. The funny thing was, when I spotted him driving the stolen car, he was with another woman that was pregnant. I told him over the phone, I said, what I find ironic is, I go, well, did your girlfriend have the baby? And you heard her pin drop. And I says, because the woman I saw you with at the Mercedes dealership that time isn't your wife. And he goes, thank you, detective. He couldn't get off the phone quick enough. So he had some skeletons in his closet that he didn't want to play with me anymore. Once I kind of let him know that while we were surveilling him, we knew we had a pregnant girlfriend, and that was the end of that.
Well, a lot of these diplomats are just cream of the crop. They're some of the best people that you can possibly run into. So not overly surprised about that story.
No, and it's funny because that old expression, you get further with sugar than you do vinegar. I'll give you another example of something like that. Early in my career, we're in the Hunts Point section of the Bronx, very industrial area, factories. And after 5 o'clock at night, the place shuts down and it becomes pimps and hoes. So you've got prostitutes and pimps, and you got the Johns that drive around and they pick up the girls for a quickie. And pulled over this BMW for a taillight out. And, the driver starts getting mouthy immediately. He's an attorney. He tells me, I know why you pulled me over. You see a Mercedes or a BMW in a impoverished neighborhood. You think you could shake the trees. So my partner and I go, and he's got a prostitute in the car, which is even funny, right? So my partner and I go back to the car and I'm writing him a ticket. My partner goes, you believe this fucking guy? I says, I got him by the balls. He doesn't even know it, right? So we walk back to the car, and he starts giving me shit again, and I notice he's got a wedding ring on. And he goes, I need your name and number. I'm going to be making a civilian complaint against you. And I said, that's fine. Here you go, Ferrari. Give him a shield number and everything. And he goes, this is an abuse of power. I said, no. I said, I'm going to show you an abuse of power. Get out. So I make him and the prostitute get out of the car. While the prostitute gets out of the car, my partner starts taking down all her information, name, date of birth, pimp, etc., street corner. And I said, here's the deal. I says, you're getting this ticket for the taillight out. I says, if you make that complaint, I says, I'm going to find your number in the phone book, I'm dating myself. I'm going to call your wife up in, I think it was Scarsdale or Hartsdale, and I'm going to tell her what you were doing down here. I said, if on the off chance, I said, you're not listed in the phone book, I will pick up this crackhead and drive up to your house within a week and have her explain to your wife what you were doing down here, down in the point at 11 o'clock at night. Oh my God, Jesus Christ, I'm sorry. He gets on his hands and knees. He's begging me forgiveness. I go, I guess we understand each other. He goes, yeah, no problem. Never heard another fucking thing about it.
Oh, all right. Well, yeah. You worked in that department for 10 years?
Yeah, I bounced around the job a lot. Like I started off as a patrolman. I worked at a DUI unit. I worked at a plainclothes unit, an anti-crime unit going after pickpockets, robbery in progress, etc. Then I spent about a year and a half in the Manhattan North Narcotics Division doing buy and bust operations. I wasn't an undercover. I was an investigator, getting search warrants or rolling in after the undercover made a buy, although I did make a couple of small-time buys. And I ghosted a lot, which means you're kind of watching the undercovers on foot to make sure nobody tries to rob them or screw around with them.
Okay, man. Boy, that, yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's hard for a lot of people to understand how, like you said, NYPD's, 30, 40,000 officers, the largest law enforcement agency in the world. And you're dealing with, 8 million people that are permanent residents. And then, who knows how many people come into that city every day?
I don't know, but it's closer to 9 million people. And, oh God, yeah. I mean, I don't remember the number, but someone posted like how many people use the subway a year, and it's like in the billions. So it's probably over 1 million people a day use the subway. Just to put that into perspective, how populated.
So you have to fluctuate. Yeah. So dealing with, say, 10 million people average per day, pretty much anything that can happen will happen there in that city.
Yeah.
So now your career started when?
1987.
Okay. So you were kind of in the middle of the worst crime rate ever recorded there in New York City. So now, based on everything I've talked about with these other detectives and research that I've done, back in the early 90s, my understanding is the worst year, I think it was 91 or 92. It was like 2,300 murders that year.
Oh, yeah.
So what is that, like 4, 5 a day? No, 6 a day.
Yeah, it just depends. I mean, you had incidents like the Happy Land Social Club where that guy went back to a social club after getting smacked around. He got thrown out. He set the place on fire. And I think 87 people died in one shot. That's ruled a homicide. Or, shootouts. And yeah, I mean, it was, let's put it this way. Like when you would go down to the morgue sometimes to identify a body, well, it wasn't like an episode of Quincy where there's one guy, with the body on a slab and a lab coat, writing shit down. I tell the story all the time. When I was in the police academy, they bring us down to the morgue. It was like a Jiffy Lube. It's like an 8-bay, garage. And I mean, there's guys cutting with wizard tools, sawing the back of people's skulls and pulling their brains out, weighing it in the produce. They had the old-fashioned produce scales, like your mom would weigh a head of lettuce before she purchased it. They're weighing body parts and making jokes about it. It was like, I just did it like, it was so crazy. It was like being in a movie. That's just how fucking crazy it is. And at the far end, I'll never forget, like, you had 6 or 7 autopsies going. At the far end, there was some kid that had got shot up the night before. And you got this old crusty medical examiner. He's got this tool, like a needle nose, and he's pulling bullets out of this guy's, and holes out of this guy and dumping them in a metal tray. And he's saying shit to some guy that's writing stuff down. And hanging over his shoulder is this old homicide detective who's got eating an Egg McMuffin and drinking a coffee. And he says, well, what do you think? And the medical examiner turns to him and goes, suspicious suicide. And we couldn't stop laughing. I mean, it was just like the guy is hogtied and shot like 1 million times. And, one guy's eating an Egg McMuffin and the other guy's laughing. Another time I'm sitting in an apartment with a DOA and the medical examiner comes in drinking a cup of coffee and eating a slice of pizza. Like, just kind of walks in, disheveled, shirt untucked. He's eating a slice and he's like, yeah, he goes, this is like the fucking fourth one I've done this hour. So no, people were dropping like flies back then.
That's crazy. I've met a couple of MEs in my day, and those guys are an interesting breed, man, just to be able to do that, constantly dealing with, here their entire training, basically, 12 years of school is all designed around helping people stay alive. And then they go to become an ME, and then, basically they're determining cause of death. And
I know they make like a hard left.
Yeah, that's a different direction than what they had been training for a long time. So sometimes you wonder what kind of trauma they went under in order to go that direction.
I think some of it is trauma, but different people have different skill sets to handle different things. Like, a lot of times people ask me on these shows, about my experience down at Ground Zero 9/11, or like the things that I saw. Do I have nightmares? And I say, I sleep just fine. I think to be successful in that line of work, being a medical examiner or a cop, you've got to be able to deal with things and then compartmentalize it and say, okay, well, I'm fine. At the end of the day, I'm okay. You know what I mean? I saw some terrible shit, but I'm fine and I'm going to get on with my life. It's like I'm not haunted by any of this stuff. I'm really not. And I'm guessing, with some of these medical examiners, it's the same mindset. Oh,
I'm sure. I've actually interviewed a number of, and I'm good friends with these guys too, some of these criminal psychologists, where they're like, the most of the time, what cops are dealing with is what Dr. Lee Meller, I don't know if you know him, but he's one of the leading guys in like serial killings and rapes and things. And he described what most officers go through as the sewer, meaning that all the blood and the guts and the drugs and needles and just the filth that you see on a daily basis. And a lot of it is because of that's where people choose to live. And some of it is just people are shot up, and that's gory and traumatizing, and that's kind of the sewer. And that's kind of on the horizontal axis. So then on the vertical axis, though, and I think this is where some of those guys that can't really compartmentalize kind of run into problems, is what he calls the abyss. And the abyss is that, vertical level where it's going up and down and at cross sections with the sewer. And that's kind of where the why is answered. And a lot of times there is no why. So you could try to delve into why people do certain things when they're committing crimes and doing heinous things to other people. And, you look at it and you say, how could somebody actually do that to another human being? But a lot of times there is no answer. It's just, they impulsively decided to, rob somebody and it went bad, and then they ended up shooting each other, and who knows what happens after that. But the crazy thing is I really like what you just said. You compartmentalize it, you look at yourself and you say, am I okay today? And then you drive on.
You have to. And I know people, and I've run into people, that I worked with or I knew, and they never got over certain things, and I'm not judging them for it, but they were, and I really don't want to get too close to the target, but I know a couple of people who were involved in a couple of things that they were never the same again. They just weren't. They were just a different person after the shit hit the fan with one thing or another.
So as we get into just your career, you've described a couple of run-ins with different types of people. So if you were asked, like on Thanksgiving, you're around the family and, especially there in North Korea, if you're hanging out with those guys, then what is it? What kind of story are you asked to tell over and over?
Oh, God. When I got into writing books, I realized the only way to sell books is to do podcast interviews and radio interviews. So I do between 5 and 10 interviews a week. And I get asked, it's funny, what's the craziest story? What's the goriest story? It just depends on what you're looking for. You know what I mean? It's, I've had things happen to me where, you think something's going one way and it's like, oh, shit. It's something totally different. Like you get called to one thing. Okay, the early 2000s, we're losing Audi A6s. They're just vanishing off the face of the earth. We're losing 5-10 a week. And they're not turning up anywhere. They're not showing up chopped. No one's driving them and getting arrested. They're just vanishing. So we know the cars are getting shipped. What we find out is you've got a Chinese ex-military, well, I wouldn't call him ex, but a military intelligence officer in Brooklyn. He hooks up with this Jamaican middleman in the Bronx. And the middleman knows all these car thieves. So the Chinese guys put an order in for 25 to 30 stolen Audi A6s a month. The Jamaican middleman farms this off to steal teams. So the scam worked like this. The Asians would pay the Jamaican middleman $5,000 a car. The Jamaican would pay the car thieves between $500 and $1,000 a car. They steal a couple of cars at a time. They park them on the street, let them cool off. Then they would bring them out to this warehouse they had in Brooklyn on Metropolitan Avenue. It looked like a regular warehouse. Every morning, the garage gate would go up. 2, 3, 4 Audis would go in. They'd shut the door or the gate. Inside, you had shipping containers. They would drive 2 stolen Audis per shipping container. They'd let the air out of the tires so the car would sit lower. They would build wooden frames above the 2 stolen Audis, and then they would hoist another 1 or 2 cars in there so they were able to put between 3 to 4 stolen Audis per shipping container. Then they would call a trucking company. They would come and pick up the container. They would take the container out to Newark, New Jersey. They were put on trains. They were railed across the United States. Then they were loaded on cargo ships in Long Beach, California, and shipped to Shanghai. And this was going on for years. And what would happen is either the cops would get too close or they got a close call. The Chinese would close up shop and vanish for 6 months, 8 months. And then they would reappear, rent out another garage. This was going on for quite some time before we finally figured out what they were doing. So we had multiple wiretaps. That's the beauty of working for the New York City Police Department. We have so many members. We grabbed 7 or 8 cops that could speak a variety of dialects, Cantonese and Mandarin, to monitor the Asian wiretaps. We had Spanish cops because our car thieves were Spanish, monitoring their phone conversations. So we got this international car theft ring going. And what we quickly figure out is these guys, the thieves, are also in the murder for hire business. And they're talking about whacking this guy and killing that guy. At one point during the case, these guys went down to Woodbridge, Virginia, and they hit a Harley-Davidson dealership, did a commercial burglary, stole a bunch of motorcycles and jackets and helmets. They bring it up to the Bronx. I mean, you would think that stealing cars to ship out of the country was keeping these guys busy enough. These guys were stealing everything that couldn't be nailed down. Then what they did was they're selling stuff out of their garage piecemeal, these jackets and motorcycles. A couple of neighborhood kids figure out where they've got this stolen stuff stashed. So what they do is they do a burglary, break into these guys' garage and steal their stuff. Well, these guys got pissed off and in the middle of our case, killed a guy for breaking into their stuff. So we had to yank 2 of these guys off the playing fields in the middle of the case. But we didn't jeopardize the international shipping case. But when we took that case down, I mean, we locked up 4 or 5 Chinese nationals, probably close to 10 or 12 car thieves, and we solved or cleared between 13 and 15 homicides. So, I mean, you never really know what you're getting involved in. And once you go up on a phone, we call going up on a phone, I mean, just the possibilities are endless of, what criminal activities these guys, in what direction they're going to take you in.
Yeah, anything that big, you're talking. I mean, I kind of think of those guys as the same level as like the cartels down in Mexico. That, yeah, some of them are moving drugs, some of them are moving people, but ultimately they're going to be involved in everything. So, yeah, and there's a reason they find these big mass graves down there is because I'm sure they identify a whole bunch of people and then, that are causing them problems or any kind of resistance, and then ultimately they round them up and put them all in the ground together.
Yeah, same as the guys that are like digging tunnels for that, right? So, over the border at Tijuana, they dig these, 1,000 feet tunnels that pop up in a warehouse in the United States. A lot of times the guys that design those tunnels or work on those tunnels, they kill them because they know where it is. So, I mean, they're expendable. After that tunnel has been completed, they're expendable.
Yeah. I don't know if you heard Elon Musk was talking about the tunnels, and they're actually trying to develop technology that'll detect them. And I don't know if they're looking for the sound of digging the tunnel or the hollowness of it or what. But he was also saying, by the way, the Israeli military would pay you big bucks for that.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure at some point there might be technology for that already in the infancy stages, or there will be. And that makes a lot of sense, where you could find a void over a period of time. I mean, nowadays, with topography and everything, they're mapping the ocean. So why wouldn't they be able to find a tunnel,
Yeah, well, yeah, I imagine the question is, how often can they sweep that area? There's a lot of ground to cover. So what is the border? Well, it's usually not the border. It's usually into a city like San Diego or something like that, where you're tunneling into an actual city, and then you can come up underneath a certain point. But yeah, they're sure good at it.
That works for them. And they're doing it, mules walking it over. They're loading up trucks. I remember when I was in autocrime, we got called to a garage in the Bronx, off of Southern Boulevard. Narcotics had this long-term case. It was an 18-wheeler that had come up from Mexico and, believe it or not, made its way to the Bronx. And they, I guess through phone intercepts and informants and everything, the truck goes to this garage in the Bronx. It was at night too. It was like 8, 9 o'clock at night. They watched this 18-wheeler go in, and it was a refrigerated truck too. And they waited a couple of minutes, and they rushed in. And what they found was in the back of this 18-wheeler, where you would think the refrigerated unit is, popped open. And I think they got like 450 or 500 keys. And the guys were divvying it up because, and I've seen this before because I've made a couple of kilo arrests in my career. It's almost like UPS with like or an Amazon package with a label on it. So you would be RoboCop and I would be NYPD, and the bricks of coke would have different things written on it with a Sharpie or stamped with a logo on it. Well, all right, that's going to Jared. That's going to Vic. And, they were whacking it up. There were duffel bags and everything. And I forget what they brought us in there for, to ID a couple of the bad guys' cars that showed up to pick up the kilos. But, oh, yeah, it's big and it's sophisticated.
Well, when you're talking billions of dollars, there's a lot of money. You can bring in a lot of shady people, and everybody, frankly, if they can make 10 times what they can working on a farm or working a job, somewhere else, then yeah, there's never going to be a lack of opportunity to commit crime. So
it's human nature.
Well, in fact, as you were talking, one of the things that popped in my head, out of the New York City area, how many vehicles a year are stolen out of there?
So when I was active in the early 90s, pre-Giuliani, we were averaging 150,000 stolen vehicles a year.
Holy cow.
Yeah. When I retired, I think the number was down to like 20 or 25,000, like when I retired in 2007. So we had brought it down quite a bit.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, it's interesting how some people just insist that there's no correlation between major crimes like homicide and rape and then, all the other crimes, all the way from burglary up to auto theft. And in my mind, I'm like, no, there's a direct relation to that. So as one is going up, then the dollar signs keep getting bigger. And as the dollar signs keep getting bigger, it's kind of like again, at the border. If there's massive numbers of people coming across the border, the people that are instigating that and the people that are making that happen at a quicker rate are making more money. Well, as more and more money is made, the willingness to defend that, even with, massive violence, goes up.
Yeah.
And, when you start messing with people's billion-dollar business, they are going to, frankly, not like that, and if they decide, hey, you're the problem that is slowing our business down, the easiest way is just take care of them.
Oh, yeah, they'll throw everything they have at you. And also it fuels a lot of things. So now they got all this money, they want toys, right? And they don't want to pay for it new. I saw that with drug dealers up in New York, and I'm talking, not making money like the cartel guys, but you're talking about drug dealers that are making $30,000-$40,000 a week, right? I mean, they were driving all the newest of cars. We used to call them tag jobs. So, they didn't want to go to the Mercedes or BMW dealership and pay $60,000 for a new, M3 or something. So they'd hire somebody to steal an M3, change the VIN number on it, and it'd be a toy for them. What, jet skis or a boat, or like you said, they're making all this money, and they are criminals. A lot of them, they spend their money on the illegal market, if you could believe that.
How many of them actually become legitimate business people?
They don't. They set up businesses to launder the money. So if you go up to a place in Washington Heights, which is the whole neighborhood is Dominican. When I was working there, I don't know if it's changed, but when I was up there, it was clothing. The whole neighborhood was clothing places, restaurants, and telecommunicado places where you could call the Dominican Republic for 8 cents a minute. It was all these businesses that more than likely were started with drug money.
Yeah, that's crazy. Crazy stuff. Yeah. It's, one of the things I love talking to NYPD guys is, New York is kind of if you were to take basically all the cities from all across the country and put them in one location, it would basically be equivalent of New York.
Yeah.
I mean, you have everything there. You have, gangs from every race and country. You have any kind of industry there that you can possibly think about, all the way from money laundering and, white collar financial crimes, especially with the financial centers that are there, all the way down to sex trafficking and human trafficking. And it's all there. And so the expertise that NYPD officers make are, to me, it's just you get such a cross pollination of everything.
That's a great cross pollination. That's a great analogy. I mean, it's true. You see so much, and it's funny because they wanted us to work with informants quite a bit. I didn't like informants because you couldn't trust them as far as you could throw them. I had a handful in my career. Got very minimal from them. Although I worked with a guy, it's in one of my books, where this guy, we couldn't keep up with this informant. I mean, he was giving us, it started with auto theft, and then it became home invasion, and then it became guns and shipping cars to the Dominican Republic. And I mean, like all informants, he eventually got in trouble, took off to the Dominican Republic, and then he was like Anthony Hopkins at the end of Silence of the Lambs calling us from the DR. You know what I mean? Like, hey, how's it going? Like, we can't talk to you anymore, right? Like, you got an active warrant here in Manhattan, and DA's going to throw you in jail for years, and we're not supposed to be talking to you. And he's like, oh, I'm just enjoying a drink here in the Dominican Republic. And then he calls us up a year or two later. My partner told me he got all shot up because I think they figured out over in the DR that he was working with us. So they lit him up, and he called up and told me he was in the hospital, shot up. My partner's like, I can't help you. Like, you're in a hospital in the Dominican Republic. We can't help you. But, that guy gave us so much stuff. The famous story with him is he calls us up one day on a Monday, and he says, I was with Horatio over the weekend. Horatio was this guy who was a prolific car thief. I'm like, yeah. He goes, we're going down the West Side Highway, and we see Mike Tyson driving a Ducati, which back then was a $30,000 motorcycle. I said, yeah. He goes, well, Horatio followed him down to the Javits Center, and Tyson went into some trade show. He goes, Horatio jumped on the back of his bike, broke the ignition, and took off when Mike Tyson stole the Ducati. It's like, you got to be kidding me. Well, where's the bike? He goes, it's in his apartment. Now, that sounds crazy to one of your listeners, but if you saw Washington Heights, it would be no problem to drive a motorcycle into a building, into an elevator, nobody blink an eye. So I says, well, what's the apartment number? We're going to get a warrant, knock down his door, get this motorcycle back. He goes, well, hold on. He's got like 3 bikes in his apartment, right? 3 bikes, a stolen motorcycle in his apartment. He goes, he's going to ship them. He goes, I'll give you the shipper. He goes, you can do a shipping case and get up with more stuff. I said, all right. I forget all about this. About 2 weeks later, it's a Sunday. I'm watching football. My partner calls me up and goes, you want to make overtime? So what are you talking about? He goes, remember Mike Tyson's motorcycle? I said, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. What about it? He goes, it's getting shipped tonight. I says, where? Red Hook or Newark? I'm thinking the ports. He goes, no. He goes, they took all these motorcycles apart. They bubble wrapped them, and they're in crates. and they're going to get airlifted. They go into an airshipper place out in Kennedy Airport. So I says, all right. And sure enough, that night, these clowns show up with a stolen van that they took the seats out of and loaded it up with all these motorcycles, and they were going to airship it, and they got grabbed at the airport. So, I mean, with informants, there's another story one time, Major Case Narcotics comes to us and says, we got an informant that knows a guy, a crooked clerk at DMV, that pumps out phony driver's license. Well, they're good licenses, but under people's names. So if I went to this clerk at DMV, I could get a driver's license with my face with your information, right? So we said, yeah, we want to talk to him. We meet. So me and my sergeant get in this car with these two detectives from Major Case. It's up in Washington Heights, pouring rain. The undercover gets in the car. He tells us how it works. We said, great. All right, yeah, we'll give you a call next week. We'll just set this up. He goes, all right. So the detectives go, you want us to drive around the corner? He goes, no, I got my hoodie on. No one's going to recognize me. I'll just get out of here. So undercover steps out of the car. The four of us, we're thanking the Major Case detectives that, no problem. You could work with him. While we're talking, I'll never forget it. It's pouring rain. A guy just walks past us slowly. He looked like a delivery guy carrying bags of Chinese food. Just walked past us in the pouring rain, right? A couple of minutes later, the detective up front, the Major Case detective's phone rings. And he's like, yeah, really? Okay, no problem. Gets off the phone. He goes, would you guys mind hanging out and giving us a hand with an arrest? I said, yeah, no problem. What's going on? He goes, you see that fucking guy that just walked by he looks like a Chinese delivery guy? We said, yeah. He goes, he's a courier. The informant spotted him after he got out of our car. What he does is a couple of times a week, he walks down to the Pathmark parking lot and makes a drop-off. He goes, so he's going to drop off weight in the Pathmark parking lot. We're going to do a rip. We're going to snatch whoever he's delivering the drugs to. We said, all right. So we follow this guy on foot, but in our car, goes into this Pathmark parking lot. Guy walks right up to the back of this Honda Accord, opens up the back door, and just gets in. He's in there about a minute, gets out without the bag. So we watched the guy walk off the set because we don't want to burn the undercover, because if they saw each other, he's going to say, oh, I know who spotted me. So we let him walk off. We pull over the car in the Pathmark parking lot. It's two people from Trenton, New Jersey, and they bought a key. So, I mean, it was just, it went from being us using this informant for a driver's license. He spots a courier, calls his handlers, and we get involved in a thing where we lock up these people from New Jersey that we're going to take a kilo back.
Wow. So, as you're telling these stories, I'm sure you've basically pulled the best of your career, but on a daily basis, even in a city the size of New York, how often are things like this happening? I mean, is this like daily? Is it weekly?
Well, not to me, but yeah, it goes on all the time. Like, your best gauge, it's funny. I tell people, if you're ever in Manhattan, go down by Chinatown and go on Baxter Street, and you're going to see the entrance to Manhattan Central Booking. It's this big roll-down gate that's got signs all over it, stay out, police facility. And just hang out for 15 minutes and tell me what you see. There's cars pulling up, police cars with people getting out of cars, detectives pulling up, narcotics vans pulling up, because that's where everybody goes when they get arrested in Manhattan. After they get processed in the precinct, they go down to Manhattan Central Booking, or they call it the Tombs, because it's an underground labyrinth jail. And they spend, a day or two or three until they see the judge. And some of these people you're watching go into this building are never getting out. That's the entry point into the criminal justice system. And depending on the crime of their record, they're never getting out. And you just never know what you're going to see in a precinct. You just don't.
Active, man. So always something going on in New York, right?
Definitely.
Well, Vic, I think we could probably go on all day, but tell the audience where people can find your books and any other podcasts or anything like that.
Sure. So go to the Amazon book section, type in my name, Vic Ferrari, like the car. My book library will come up. All my books have colorful artwork on it, like NYPD, Law and Disorder. All my paperbacks are $10 or $2.99 ebook download. And if they want to get a hold of me, they got a question, or they want to, bring me on their show as a guest, you can find me at Twitter and Instagram at VicFerrari50.
Awesome. Well, Vic, it's been fun, and I appreciate you coming on, sharing some of your experiences. It's always entertaining for the audience.
Jared, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine. Okay, Vic, thanks. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.